You are listening to Leading the Factory Forward with your host, Lynn Friest. We share interviews with manufacturing experts and strategies for embracing the digital future, recruiting a new workforce, finding new business. Lynn is an advanced manufacturing strategist and leadership consultant who is on a mission to show manufacturing leaders how to improve their current operations while preparing for a digital future. And here's your host, Lynn Friest.
Welcome to this episode of Leading the Factory Forward. This is episode 71, and today is a conversation on entrepreneurship with Kurt Heiar. At Leading the Factory Forward, our goal is to help you create a compelling future for yourself, your teams, and your organization. I encourage you to visit my website and download the summary at the bottom of each podcast episode, and you can use that as a tool to capture notes as you start exploring the concepts in this particular episode. Or to help you get started on your journey and to stay up to date on new episodes, please download the free worksheet, 3 Steps You Need for a More Productive Workday. In this episode, I'm delighted to have Kurt Heiar, Associate Professor and Director of the University of Iowa Statewide Venture School Program. He's going to share with us his insights from helping hundreds of entrepreneurs develop their dreams. I've worked with Kurt for over several years in the startup program called Venture School. He currently has over 7 different locations in the state of Iowa and having many startup people in each of those locations. Kurt himself has led 5 startups and is currently the CEO of a startup in addition to his other duties. In this episode, we're going to cover Kurt's experience with startups, the entrepreneur's journey, the mindset that an entrepreneur needs, and a little bit about doing customer discovery for new entrepreneurs. Let's get started. Well, welcome, Kurt, and thank you for being with us on this episode of Leading the Factory Forward. I really appreciate it. And I wondered, just to get started, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your work, what you're working on now, and maybe even a little bit about your journey.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invitation, Lynn. I appreciate it. As you said, my name is Kurt Heiar. I'm a native Iowan, although I spent a considerable number of years outside the state for career purposes. Came back to the state as the CEO of a startup company that was based in Eastern Iowa. I've transitioned from just being that entrepreneurial executive to also really desiring it to give back to some of the folks who are coming up as our next generation of entrepreneurs, as well as corporate leaders. And so I joined the University of Iowa about 8.5 years ago. I'm an associate professor teaching in the professional MBA program there, and I teach strategic management of technology. I teach entrepreneurship and innovation, corporate entrepreneurship. And so I wear kind of a number of hats, but they're all centered around how do we capture the power and the expertise that entrepreneurs bring to solutions or to solution creation and use it more broadly in our economy and our ecosystem. So I wear an academic hat, but I can tell you that I am at heart a private sector, private industry guy by training and by career. As I mentioned, I was brought back to be the CEO of a company that was in the drug discovery industry. It was very successful. About 3.5 years after I started working on that project, we ended up having it acquired by a publicly traded NASDAQ firm. So my shareholders, all of my employees, and of course the management and so forth, had a very successful exit on that. Subsequent to that, I've been the CEO for John Papa John, a legendary entrepreneur in his own right and investor, now working on our 6th company together. Currently, I'm the CEO of a company that utilizes computer vision and artificial intelligence and machine learning and so forth for the prediction and the prevention of workplace injury, focusing specifically in the manufacturing sectors of heavy industrial, shipping, animal processing, things like meat plants and so forth, where workers' compensation and risk is significant. And we're using a system that we believe is state of the art and very much the next generation of how we can help solve some of the issues around worker injury and productivity. So that's what I'm currently doing. I'm teaching at the university as a faculty member, and I'm also leading this company, which is now about 2 years old. In addition, I'm the director for the state of Iowa's Venture School program on behalf of the University of Iowa. This is a program not for students per se, but really for our citizens across the state in all kinds of communities with all kinds of ideas. Some are retirees. Some are folks who are single parents and want to try something out of the home or on the side. But whatever it is, we take these folks, put them through a national I-Corps program that lasts about 7 weeks, and we really try to help them understand what it means to take an idea from just an idea that's nebulous in your head and turn it in perhaps to an opportunity, or at least assess if there's an opportunity attached to it. So that keeps me busy. And finally, I also spend the last 6 summers up until this year with our current situation in Greece in a program there for a New York City firm, THI, as well as with the U.S. Embassy there, and do both economic development as well as corporate consulting and entrepreneurial training for about 50 startups over there now that I've worked with, and continue to do that hopefully next summer again once we're able to travel a little bit more frequently. So that, in a nutshell, is what I've done on the entrepreneurial side. In addition, I spent 10 years as an executive with one of the largest medical companies in the world based out of Chicago.
Great. Coming back to the venture school, that's how we first met. And I know you've impacted or at least seen a whole lot of people with great ideas in your time with venture school. Give us a flavor of the scope of what you've been able to experience there.
Well, we've had close to 700 individuals graduate from this program now over the last 5.5, 6 years, representing over 400 startup and early stage companies, and in some cases, existing companies that, as I said earlier, kind of wanted to become more entrepreneurial. And what we've seen there is the power and the excitement and the added value that startups bring to any ecosystem, and specifically to our Midwestern states. Entrepreneurs really bring opportunities for job creation, opportunities for wealth creation, opportunities for younger folks to get experience wearing a lot of different hats. Millennials love to be in environments where they not only do their assigned job, but have opportunities to participate in things like idea creation and brainstorming and problem solving and have their voices heard. So they want a bigger palette, if you will, at work today than perhaps we have traditionally offered. And I think that fits in the sweet spot of what entrepreneurship is all about. It's a team sport. It requires networking, and silos kill entrepreneurship. So I've seen a lot of dynamic and vibrant ideas emerge. We've had just about every for-profit and nonprofit category that I think I can think of. So retail, Main Street, small, manufacturing, technology, internet, medical, drug, service businesses, you name it, Lynn. And I think we've probably had it. So we've also really taken a lot of pride in the fact that our program has attracted outstanding mentors, such as yourself, if I may say so, folks who give of their time during the venture school programs to work closely with these startups and to help share their wisdom and to give them industry insights and to make suggestions or simply just evaluate pitch decks and business ideas, with an eye towards being frank, with an eye towards being also helpful in terms of connecting them with other resources. And that is really the heart and soul of venture school. We have instructors who are certified to train this under the University of Iowa umbrella and the National I-Corps program. But really, it's the local mentors and the support we get from communities all across the Midwest that really help us make this the powerful program that it is.
Yeah, one thing I noted in participating with you is even though the 10 or 12 people with ideas had very different ideas, that peer group learning that went on was often really remarkable. People got an idea for their business from someone who was something really entirely different, but the ideas translate pretty well.
Yes, they do. And I love that excitement that creates. There's a real tipping point during the venture school program, and I know you've seen it, where perhaps some folks were very uncertain, not comfortable presenting what they were doing with things like customer discovery and customer interviews, for example. And by the end of the program, they stand up there and they do a very fine job of pulling it all together and being able to convey not only their idea, but why they believe it makes sense, why it should make sense for investors or for partners or whomever their objective is to reach. But that is really tangible. And I think it's really something that every time even I do it after these many startups and cohorts, I always sit back and just think to myself, I hope they realize how far they've come in a short amount of time.
Yep, absolutely. Well, shifting gears a little bit, Kurt, I'm thinking about earlier in the process, and for people like myself or yourself, the people who have been in a career for some period of time and now are saying, hey, I want to become an entrepreneur. I think the first step, at least in my eyes, has to do with mindset. And I think you've probably experienced that too as you've worked with people in that position.
Absolutely. There's a difference in mindset if you're going from a corporate career or even a small amount of time embedded in a corporation to an entrepreneurial mindset or a startup company. And it's also quite true from the academic to entrepreneur mindset as well. All three are different animals in some respects. If you want me to share for a moment for your listeners, some of the things for those folks that are currently working in larger corporations, one of the big differences is that how corporations versus entrepreneurial startups view risk. And it's viewed very differently. I mean, corporations essentially try to mitigate risk, right? They will try to manage uncertainty, and they certainly try to avoid failure if they possibly can. And so as a result of that, the senior managers of companies large and small, they want to bring out what I call their inner entrepreneurship, but they're not quite sure how to do it because their cultures are set up in a way that do not reward what entrepreneurs essentially want to do. And essentially what they want to do is they want to recognize and be rewarded for making suggestions, for problem solving, for thinking outside the box. And they don't want to be reprimanded if an idea isn't particularly successful. Entrepreneurs evaluate, they validate, they embrace risk. I mean, they're living on the edge of survival for part of their startup life. So there's a big difference in how risk is viewed. And I think that corporations, at least the ones that I consult with, that ask me to make us a little bit more flexible, a little bit more entrepreneurial. You know, our millennials want to do more than just what job we hired them for. I tell them we have to start then by making some of these changes in terms of how we embrace innovation. I also think that this piece about corporations wanting to avoid failure, you know, reprimand in a corporation for a failed innovative idea that you sold everybody can be a black mark on your career. And, you know, entrepreneurs, we think in terms of we're going to fail fast because we'll try again. And we ask ourselves, you know, what did I learn? The mindset is, what did I learn from this? The mindset is, well, it's a badge of courage for me because I was willing to try something. A lot of other people I know just talk about it. And so we'll fail fast, and we don't consider that to be a huge black mark. So those are at least two things that I think are significantly different between the corporate mindset and the entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah, I can recall from my career with the Six Sigma mindset, 99.9% of the time, I wasn't going to make a mistake. Now, all of a sudden, to be an experimenter, you want to make a lot of mistakes, like you say, fail quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, it's interesting. I mentioned before that one of the courses that I teach to the MBAs have to do with strategic management of technology, and that incorporates product development and things. And, you know, by nature, that part of the function in a corporation, research, development, and so forth, you know, is fraught with uncertainty, at times even chaos, and at times, you know, simple blind luck. The rest of the corporation, you know, accounting department and HR and so forth, they want to take out all the uncertainty that they possibly can. I mean, most corporations don't want their CPAs to start being very creative. And so you have this inherent butting of heads anyway. The researchers are perfectly fine with uncertainty. Well, we tried this, now we're going to go try that. And the other side of the house is saying, you know, you guys have got to get your act together, and you just got to produce this in a very controlled manner. So you're right. There's just a lot of entrepreneurial thinking embedded in parts of corporations, but unfortunately, a lot of the time it's not recognized or encouraged, I don't believe.
Yeah, and that was one of the lessons I know I had to learn, is that I had to be more willing to be bad at something. Or as a colleague of mine said, Lynn, you have to be willing to practice in public. And again, that wasn't part of my corporate experience.
That's right. It's true. And it's funny because we all have our own style, and we all have our own approach and our own view of these things. But there are a lot of similarities. There are a lot of similarities between the tried and true traditional business practices and management tools. But the same is true now on the entrepreneurial side. We've learned that entrepreneurship can be taught. We have learned that entrepreneurs can use tools and techniques that de-risk at least the opportunity that they're hoping to go out and pursue. And a lot of folks still think, well, entrepreneurs are just crazy people who get lucky. I can tell you probably 100 quote unquote lucky entrepreneurs that I know put in countless hours of work and research and study in order to figure out the best path to commercialize. And there's a lot of science to that side as well.
The other thing that has occurred to me in the transition was companies provide a structure for you, whether it be a structure around your value, a structure around how you interact with people, a structure to your day. And now all of a sudden, if you're going to go out and be a company of one, you have to invent your own structures or your own values. And again, I'm sure you've had that same experience.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, Lynn. I mean, you go out and you have to be you obviously have to have self-discipline, but you're right. You create what it is. And I think that ultimately is one of the really attractive things about the entrepreneurial path, because it's hard in a corporation to come up with the idea, take the idea from the crib and help it learn to walk and talk and stand up, and then ultimately, hopefully, see it do some good in society and see it become successful and see it help other people who joined you in your cause along the way become successful. That is a feeling that is much tougher to do in a corporation, obviously, than it is as an entrepreneur. And I think that's one of the allures of entrepreneurship is you truly get to be the captain of your own ship. Not to say you won't add employees and advisors along the walk and the talk, but you certainly will be given an opportunity to see your dream become something that is tangible and hopefully helps our society at large.
You have an interesting point there, Kurt, because also when you're, quote, a company of one, sometimes people feel they have to do it all. And I had that same feeling. But what I quickly found is there are people out there you can partner with or you can hire. If I need somebody that can write better than I can hire somebody to help with the writing. Or if I need somebody to produce my podcast, I don't need to learn all that. As an entrepreneur, at some point, you always have to remember to focus on the core value that you're going to add and not let your time get all consumed by other things.
Yes. The phrase that I like to use, Lynn, is, entrepreneurs cannot be a mile wide and an inch deep. Entrepreneurs, have to differentiate typically. They have to have a better solution than the status quo, at least in an existing marketplace. And as a result of that, you can be exceptionally good at one or two things and good at the other things that other people are doing. But you cannot go out and literally try to do everything better than everybody else because you don't have the time, you don't have the resources, you don't have the capital and the human resources. So as a result, you're right. You have to be disciplined, but you also have to understand through doing your customer discovery work and through secondary research, where is that opportunity out there for me to put a new slice of pizza in the pizza pie? And I want to own my slice. And where is that slice? Where can I get my foot in the door? So you have to be very focused. That's not to say to all of you listening to this that you shouldn't think big. You shouldn't dream big. You shouldn't want to be a billion-dollar corporation someday. That's perfectly fine. And I'm with you. I mean, I always think big too. But sometimes you have to also recognize at any given point that you have to get some traction and you have to be focused and very, very good at the couple things that you're hanging your hat on.
The other thing you just mentioned, customer discovery. I know we put a lot of energy and time in that in the venture school. And again, that's something that in the corporate or academic life, you didn't have to discover customers. In most cases, they were in front of you. But now if you're going to go out and say, if I am an expert in supply management, I have to go out and find people that want that, So that whole idea, I think, is still powerful for anybody that's getting started on their own.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a lot of truth in people say, well, a customer can't give you the solution. They can't design your product, right? They can't write your software code. And that's true, but you're not asking them that. You're going out and you're asking them to talk to you about what are the needs, what are the problems, what are the challenges as they do their jobs every day that they wish they had a better answer for. They can tell you that. And once they tell you in a perfect world, I wish, Lynn, that X could be taken away or changed or whatever, then it is your job as an entrepreneur to go develop the solution that solves it better than the status quo. So the customer discovery really gives you that window to look at need and problem truly in the voice of the customer and gives you an opportunity to find, as I said before, where's that entry point in that particular market segment where you may have a real opportunity to do something important. Mm-hmm. The other thing I was going to mention on going back for a second to mindsets, we have a few academics or folks who are trying to wear both hats these days as a researcher, but also hopefully as someone commercializing their research. There's also a couple mindset differences that I'll mention for any listeners who fall into that category. One of them is that we got to remember that academics are built to study problems. They want to know the causes of problems, right? And they will research things to the very deepest root of a possibility. It's why is coronavirus contagious? Right? What is the structure on the outside of the viral particle that causes this or that? But entrepreneurs really focus more on solving problems. And that may or may not include even the cause sometimes. They want to look at outcomes. We want to create opportunities, really, to develop solutions that are better than what we've got to choose from today. So there's a fundamental difference in how that mindset looks at the world. Research and problems and the causes of problems versus getting, I guess, more quickly to, well, there's a problem and can I come up with a better solution? I think the other thing is that, academics function these days, at least, in environments of shrinking resources. It's always the state budget's been cut, the federal grant program is being slashed, et cetera. But entrepreneurs, by definition, we have to dream of the possibilities. And by that, I mean, we assume that resources can be generated to fund great ideas. We just make that leap of faith. So we don't think in terms of constraints. If you have a passion about your idea, and you want to really see that go somewhere, rarely will an entrepreneur say, I'm not going to do it because I just don't think I can get any resources. They will do things to the best of their ability to try to put resources behind it. And entrepreneurs really are self-promoting. They self-promote themselves, their ideas, their work, and they invite other people in. They want other people to join the team. They've seen the transformations, I think, that come from promoting oneself and one's idea, getting other people excited and want to help. Whereas academics really step away from promotion of their work or themselves or whatever, because it's, I guess, for lack of a better word, it's seen sometimes in some circles as an unseemly thing to do. I recently even had an academic, well-respected researcher at a Big Ten university tell me that his department basically said, you can invent and innovate all you want, but just understand it should all be free. You should never charge for any of that. Which is not necessarily a tiny minority of academic departments anymore. There's still a lot of them out there that think along those lines. And so as a result, we really have, again, a pretty clear difference, I think, in mindsets between what the academics do and what entrepreneurs do. And I am not in any way degrading academic research or academic work. I'm just saying that the commercialization process of research requires clearly a little bit different mindset to be successful, in my opinion.
Sure. And it leads me to think of another thing there is that whether it be an academic or even a person with deep expertise in the corporate world, people don't necessarily want your expertise. They want their problem solved. So it's not how smart you are, but can you listen to them sometimes, I think.
I agree, Lynn. There's something that I like to say, and I know you've heard me say this in various venture school forums, but believe it or not, for our engineers listening and our physicians or pharmacists or STEM folks, people don't buy technology for the sake of technology. And I always like to use the example, do you go out and buy yourself a really big flat screen TV and hang it on the wall and go out and get the latest, greatest gaming box, complete with virtual reality goggles and everything else, and put it on a shelf next to that TV? And then when your friends come over, they look at it and they say, well, that's interesting, but why isn't it hooked up? Why is the plastic still on the game box? And you respond, well, I have no intention of using it. I just wanted to show you I have the technology. Well, technology that doesn't add value to a customer segment, right, is not going to go far. And nor do we spend our money as consumers on technology or as corporations on technology that we don't need or we don't plan to use. So technology is a toolbox. It allows us to build a better solution in order to do a better job of meeting a need in the marketplace in order to commercialize. But it's not why people buy. People buy because they have a need, a problem, or a desire, and they want a better solution, as you just said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me, too, of the concept of a minimum viable product. Again, whether I have deep expertise in a subject or whatever, I need to find out what's the smallest solution that they can use. Because as I worked with, say, small companies, they can't afford or don't have the mental bandwidth to think about complex solutions. They need simple ones to at least to get started with. And so I think in terms of an expertise business, again, you have to go to where the customer might be.
Yes, I can assure a lot of your listeners that if they need some software product for their computer and they go out and buy it or download it, their first question isn't going to be, how'd you write the code? Their first question is going to be, does this solve my problem? I don't care if you use magic dust, right? Does it solve my problem? And so you're right. I think that simplicity and focusing on need and problem is one of the real keys to starting a company as an entrepreneur, because again, technology without value creation is not going to probably go far.
Sure. So thinking about sustaining things as we go along, I know it can be a long, lonely road as you're an entrepreneur getting started. What are the things that you've seen that help people hang in there, even though they announce themselves as a wonderful solution and raving fans don't show up right away? What are the things that help people sustain themselves?
Well, number one, I'm a big believer in regardless, even if you're just an N of one doing it, you need a few advisors around you. And they need to be people who either have industry expertise in whatever industry you're in. If you're in retail, then somebody who's built or had a successful retail career, for example. But you need a few people around as sounding boards because it does get lonely and there will be crises. And I think that if people say, well, what keeps them interested in helping you? Well, there's a number of ways you can do that. You can, depending on the type of business, you can give them a few stock options and say, I'm giving you a piece of the action here. So, I want you to stick around for a year and help me. Or you may just appeal to the fact that they are interested in helping, another company coming up from behind in their careers or whatever. But there are people, a lot of people, frankly, out there who are willing to give of their time to help in these situations. Mentors, advisors, call them what you want. But you really need to have a few of those folks and listen to them and let them coach you. They have wisdom, and experience is a good teacher when you're an N of one trying to do something like this. The second thing that I think keeps you going is you've got to be able to identify what are the absolute critical resources that you've got to have. Because I have found in my experience now with 6 companies is that you spend a lot of your worry time on those things that you can see the writing on the wall, so to speak, if you cannot get what you need. If you're running out of money, you need money. If you absolutely can't sleep at night because you're working 75 hours a week and your exhaustion level is off the charts, you need to be able to hire somebody else, right? Or a consultant or somebody. So you have to identify those critical resources, and then you have to use your advisors and your network in order to try immediately to get as much of that off your plate as possible so that the stress level goes down. Okay, I've got a year's worth of capital now in the bank. As a result, I can actually start focusing now on building my company, figuring out how I'm going to get in front of the right customers. How am I going to scale this? How am I going to create some revenues? It's hard to do that if every waking morning you're saying, I don't know if I'll survive till tonight. So I'm a big believer in knocking down the biggest obstacles in front of you so that you can get about doing what you really want to do, which is creating an opportunity with your idea.
Yeah, another thing with that I've found is that helping be connected with peer groups. We don't always have to consider ourselves competing against everybody, but we can find peer groups that share the pain along the journey. Mentors kind of have a different role, but I think peer groups, if you have them, those are the ones that you can whine to if need be, or bounce ideas off of.
Yeah, and there's a lot of them. I mean, there's a lot anymore, a lot of accelerators and a lot of incubators and a lot of local business organizations that provide those opportunities. I know that there's a lot of associations that are affiliated with certain industries. There's a technology association, there's a retirees association, there's, all these folks are all interesting places to check out. But again, I agree with you 100%. You need to be able to talk to people who both have done it and people who are trying to do it just like you so that you can keep your sanity.
So, Kurt, thank you. And I was going to say, what question haven't I asked about being an entrepreneur that you think is important?
I guess I would just say that if you are really interested in trying to learn more about what it takes to be an entrepreneur, the question I would say is make sure that you find out what resources and avenues are available to you in your local area and the state level, maybe even in the regional space. Because I think that, as you just said, very rightfully so, if you're doing it alone, it can be a very odd feeling at first, at least. And I think knowing where those local resources are and where people are who can help you is really important. And I think that's something that every entrepreneur should ask themselves. Okay, I listened to Lynn's podcast. This is great. Now, where do I go? What do I do? How do I get going? And I think there are many resources in virtually most decent-sized communities around the Midwest that can help answer that question. And I think it's a very important one.
Sure. Yeah, I've just personally found that trying to explain my entrepreneurial idea at the family dinner table got a lot of blank looks. And so it helped to have somebody else that was on a similar journey to talk to.
Yeah. I always kid. I used to, when I'd have an idea for something, which, I was always generating ideas. But as soon as I asked my mother, what do you think of this, Mom? Would this be a cool business? I always heard the same thing, which was, that's a great idea. And then one day I realized it's probably biased feedback.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. So again, I thank you very much, Kurt, for sharing this wisdom with our audience. And I'll also include in the show notes some links to how to contact the venture school, or for people that are in a different area, how they might connect with something else. If you think of any other resources, share them with me. I'll include those in the show notes.
I will. And if there are any folks who think that some of these ideas might be helpful in a seminar or a symposium for their corporations, then I'm willing to make some of these suggestions or help on that side as well.
Great. Well, again, many thanks, Kurt, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Lynn.
Again, my deepest thanks to Kurt for sharing his insights and knowledge on that journey of an entrepreneur. A quick recap: we talked about Kurt's experience with startups, the entrepreneur's journey, the mindset that an entrepreneur needs, how to do customer discovery. Now, we'll also have Kurt's contact information if you want to follow up with him on questions or things you're interested in. So what's up next? We're going to continue a mix of solo episodes and interviews with experts, some in manufacturing, but also some in areas that can help you in other ways build your business or build your own brand. And at least in one episode of the month, I'll be sharing my thoughts and ideas on becoming a silver entrepreneur, or a company of one, as it were, people who want to get into their own business and work for themselves. And as always, I encourage you to visit my website and download the summary at the bottom of the podcast episode as you start exploring the ideas in this episode. And to help you get started on your journey and to stay up to date on new episodes, please download the free worksheet, 3 Steps You Need for a More Productive Workday. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.